So let's start at the front of the car and kind of tell everybody what's going on here.
This whole chassis I built myself, and pretty much from scratch. Had a lot of help from buddies on some of the technical aspects and whatnot. It's got quarter elliptical springs hidden in the front frame rails. They mount way back here, and they go through the frame rail, come up, and that allowed me to get this axle shoved way back, and I actually wound up with my steering running behind the radiator. You can see, I mean, all this stuff is really close. It's a set of F1 mounts and goes right into my headlight bar. And I always say this was the hardest part of the car, was figuring out this location of all that stuff right there.
Yeah.
Because it all had to be where it had to be, and it just kind of went from there. But yeah, and then it's as short as you could get it with a small block Chevy between the radiator and the cowl.
Right. Yeah. It is as tight as it could possibly be down in here.
Yeah, I made my own little shroud there for the backside to mount the dual little electric fans, and there's a hole in the middle of it because that pulley is right up against the radiator. Vega steering box on its side, steering upward pointing pitman arm, Z-bar out of a C10 pickup, running a mechanical clutch, some swing pedals under the cowl, because it's got 3 pedals for that, being very difficult.
Hot rod stuff.
You'll notice the open transmission, that freaks a lot of people out.
Yeah.
I couldn't bring myself to build a giant transmission tunnel to take up all that room.
Oh, so you don't have a lot of room left?
No, and I got big skis for feet, so I need all the help I can get. Cool thing, this dash here is a giant chunk of aluminum that was chromed at some point, and I bought that when I was probably like 13 years old at a swap meet for $5. And for years, because I do a lot of model cars too, I had it at the back of my model car display on a shelf.
Okay.
And so I had some different black Stuart Warner gauges in it, and just kind of threw it together as a background for the model car deal. But yeah, it just kind of, as soon as I got the car, I was like, I know where that dash is going now.
There you go, yeah.
Also note the percent normal gauge I have in there.
Oh, geez.
Which is at below 0.
Below 0% normal.
Not normal at all. And there's a hour meter there too.
Yes.
It actually works. Should say the interior, kind of a harebrained idea I had. My wife built me a tent bag for the first time I went to Gathering at the Rock.
Yeah.
And it was out of this fabric because she knew I'd love it because it's ugly. And so she was like, "Oh, you'll love it." So she made that bag for me, and I carried it around when I brought the tamale wagon to Gathering at the Rock the first time. And so when it came around to this time to go to Gathering at the Rock, we had kind of started this joke about making a pair of pants out of it. And so I kind of pushed her to, my wife does a lot of sewing stuff, and so she made me a pair of pants that out of this fabric. Travis is very disappointed I wasn't wearing them. But 2 days before we went to Oklahoma, I was like, I should just do the whole interior of the car in this. And
it's like everywhere.
Yeah, it's all over the place. And my wife was more than happy to get rid of the fabric.
Right.
And so then, literally the day before we left for Oklahoma, I was like, "Can you make me some throw pillows for my lumbar support little pads?" And then this is the tassel. It was a bed cover.
Okay.
From the 70s from J.C. Penney.
Nice.
And the tassels were all around the edge of it, so I had to tie those in. So I went Friday night at the Gathering at the Rock. I had the pants on and everything. And
I may, if I can find pictures I take of that, we'll insert them into the video.
yeah, there's pictures on my Instagram of that, and probably a half dozen other people's Instagrams.
Right. So Turtleneck T is the name. So what's going on the whole back end of the ride here?
It's another set of quarter elliptical springs. Some more stuff that's super close. Hairpins running with the shock in the middle and then the forward lifting spring in the outside. The rear end again is an S10 rear end with those are stock calipers for an S10, I think it was like a ZR2 maybe or something that had those. There were two options for disc brake calipers. One of them was a standard geometric, and then that's the other one. And I got the rear end, and it had those on it, and I was like, I gotta keep those.
Yeah.
And then tying in a little bit of my past, it's got a Volkswagen tank in it.
Okay.
Hump for the rear end, and this was all my space for loading everything I needed for a week right. Plus sometimes, you know. So yeah, it's been. And this turtle deck actually came home on the roof of the tamale wagon in 2022 when I went to Gathering at the Rock. Okay. Because it came from a guy in Oklahoma, and so I drove home in my little T-panel truck with its ratchet strapped to the roof, and that was kind of the beginning of this whole thing.
Oh, this all came together, huh?
Yeah. So the weekend before the Rock, I'm gonna drive to Phoenix and then do a little journey with them to the Rock. The shop is just really filthy today, but this is kind of how it works.
Yeah, that's really awesome.
Built that from flat pieces of sheet metal in tech school.
Wow.
It actually has pedals in it. The rear end all functions and everything. The engine is 1/8" aluminum plate that I bent and welded together, TIG welded and everything. It's got an actual radiator in it. The front end steers, the crank driven distributor is actually wired in 392 Hemi firing motors. It's got a tuck and roll painted interior in it, gauges and everything. There's no layers to this garage at all.
No, not at all. I've got one of those.
I've got just a couple.
Very cool.
Oh, and the ceiling's covered too.
Just some stuff, just a little bit of stuff.
A couple things.
A little bit of stuff. Yeah. And a couple Rogers journals.
It's actually all of them.
Oh.
Yeah. I got lucky. A friend of our mutual friend of me and Mike's, he passed away, and I attended his auction, and I borrowed money from Mike, and I spent every penny I had that day, and I bought his whole collection of Rogers journals, and I won't even tell you how much I spent on them because it doesn't let people pay for those. But yeah, very glad I got all those. We even got some doubles of early ones. I just got wired all my 220 in so that I could actually make it work. This thing's also going to get going this year. There's just a couple projects in here.
Just a couple. Gets a little tight.
It's my first car. Bought it when I was 13 years old. It's got a fully built chassis underneath of it. It's been shortened 1 inch. It's got 10-inch narrowed rear end, 6-inch narrowed front end, adapter spindles, Volkswagen to early Ford, so I can run 12 spokes in the front. It's got a 820-15 Piecrest cheater slick under the stock fender in the rear. The whole car's channeled 3 inches, so it's got plenty of ground clearance underneath. 69 Rambler station wagon. It'll wind up pretty simple. Small block 5-speed and a Mustang 2-style front end. Model A coupe just getting pieced together, and then it'll get passed on down the road. Dad's roadster project over there. Pieces of a little bit of everything. Model T coupe quarters, 4-door door skins, 28, 29 front, everything. Speed coupe, 36 Ford 5. It was a 4-door sedan that was cut down, and I picked it up from a buddy of mine after he fell into a 33-34 Ford. So I got it. I'm putting Chevy quarter panels on it, give it a little bit different look. It had Model A's on it. Little sand rail project. 60s Triumph 650 over there. The 4-carb manifold over there goes on the Roadster. There's a T in this pile right here.
Somewhere in this general area.
Somewhere in that general area is a T body. Everything's a little cramped right now.
Making use of your space.
And there's a C cab.
Right, I was gonna say there's a little.
If the plastic wasn't up, you could see all my signage. I've got that Paw and Ma Automotive. That sign is from First and Main here in town in the 70s. There's another one that runs the whole length of that balcony over there that was the front of that building.
Just a couple.
One of these days I'll get around to dusting all. Talk to a bunch of people there. You know, I've got buddies that finish stuff, you know.
Those are little bastards.
I very rarely finish stuff because, you know, I have an idea in my head, you know. That's what I saw in my head. Well, it's there now. What I need to finish it for, you know.
As far as you thought it ahead, right?
That does the same. That one's nice. It was gonna get all the floor painted and streamed and striped and everything. That didn't happen. I remember when I first put this all together, I didn't have that cabinet. I had all my Wiesners up on the wall, and a couple guys about came unglued because I had a bunch of Wiesners. There aren't frames or nothing, you know. They're just prints, so it's like, I don't care. And one guy was like, "You're ruining those because you don't have them in frames." I go, "I'm pretty sure that if Keith had the option, he'd want me to buy more of his art rather than buying frames."
Right.
Like, the money I'm saving in frames, I'm spending in art. So. You can't record this part. And this truck that purple truck right there, is kind of one of the reasons I painted my car purple.
Yeah.
Purple, red engine, white highlights. Then this car here, I was telling you earlier about the FAFF deal. This car here is the one that won Drop Mood's Artist Award.
Let's do it.
All right, man. The other side's flame too.
All right, so we've driven around in it. We've heard the story of it. What do we want to tell people about this little turtle deck T and what it means to you for hot rodding?
I'd just say that you hear a lot of older guys that talk about hot rodding dying and how it's so expensive and whatnot, and I've got probably 6,000 or 7,000 in this car, all said and done. And I did 10,000 miles this year, and loose math, you can figure out, even with the massive oil consumption that this thing had. I mean, I did 10,000 miles this year and built an entire hot rod pretty much from scratch for less than $10,000. And I mean, that's not cheap. I'll grant you that. But I'm not rich by any means, and I just I've got a lot more time than money in it, and I just think this is the type of stuff that keeps hot rodding going. The young guys getting into it and building cars that it's not perfect. It's far from perfect, but it's a lot of fun, and I've inspired a lot of older guys too that are like, yeah, you need to get back to the fun of it.
Yeah.
So that's just kind of, I don't know. That's my hill to die on.
It's more fun than perfect.
Exactly. Exactly.
Well, there's the start of the story on the Turtle Deck T. And we'll bring you some more as we have time to. We only told the story of one trip, and he did 10,000 miles last year total. So there's more stories to hear, and we'll meet up again down the road somewhere, and we'll tell you some more. We are sitting here it's Maryville, right?
Yep, Maryville, Missouri.
Kansas has a Marysville.
Yep. So that's 160 miles from here.
Oh, you've been through there, I'm assuming.
I've been to car shows there before.
So we're at the home of Joey Wagner. We're down in the shop, and it's amazing the amount of artwork you have in this place. Because you just put this place up in the last few years,
it's
right?
about 6 years old.
6 years,
or 7
okay.
years.
Okay, that's longer than I thought. I was thinking it was 2 or 3. So you have a little time to decorate.
Yeah, and the thing is, I'd love to say that it's, over 6 years I've done this, but this was really the first year or two. I ran out of room, and now I've started, as you can see, I've started doing the ceiling.
And for those listening to the podcast, every square inch just about has something on it, and there's some spots in the ceiling that are open, but I don't know if that's going to last very long.
They've got their earmark on them.
So I'm up here today because we've tried for a couple months to get together to do a story on your little, what was the name of it?
The Turtle Deck T.
The Turtle Deck T, yes. You did 10,000 miles in it last year, right?
Yeah, it was a lot.
And when did you actually get it on the road? What month was it?
Let's see. It was
because Roundup was close to the first thing
April.
Okay.
When we went to Roundup, so it was the month before that, right towards the end, was when I got it running.
Okay.
I did 200 miles before we did the Roundup. So I had 200 miles of the farthest I had went before we went to Roundup was I went 43 miles to my buddy's house.
Just as a shakedown.
Just as a shakedown run. And that was without the turtle deck was on, but it wasn't painted, and it was missing a bunch of pieces. And then I basically brought it back in after that, buttoned up as much as I could, and then went just took off.
Well, we'll get into that here in a little bit. Let's start at the beginning for the car. Where did this whole? We're going to actually mention people who don't know. Maryville, Missouri. We are if you look at the state border between Kansas and Nebraska, Missouri actually goes up further north than that. And we're in that little part that's a little further north of that. So if you go to Kansas City, and probably an hour north of Kansas City.
Yep.
So that's where we are. If you're kind of listening from different parts of the country and don't understand. So
I am 45 minutes from Kansas, Nebraska, and Iowa. So we're right there.
It's beautiful country here. There's a nice hill. It's not like Western Kansas. It's like you can see for 2 counties.
Yeah. We got more bumps in the tank.
A little bit. Yeah. So what was the whole start of the T project?
So years ago, my buddy Eric Anderson out of Houston, or Dallas, he's probably going to hate me for saying this, but he built a T that I've always liked, and he built it, had an old motor and a set of really contoured deuce rails underneath of it. And I always liked that car. I watched it, the build thread that he did on it when I was a lot younger. And I saw that and I was like, oh, that's the coolest thing ever. Because I never really cared for how most people do T-buckets and everything, but I always liked that car and how short it was and how just compact the thing was.
Uh-huh.
And it was just kind of different, you know. And I always loved that it had quarter ellipticals in the front, you know. And I was like, God, that'd be cool to do a car like that. And so over the past couple of years, I've built a couple cars. And then I built a T coupe, probably 2020, I think. I built the T coupe and tried to drive it to Grease Rama and failed miserably because I had a motor that had 0 miles on it that I knew of, and so it wound up having a cracked head, so it didn't make it to Grease Rama. It overheated gloriously in a parking lot in St. Joe. So after that happened, we kind of patched it up, and eventually I took it to a buddy's house to have him tune it, and he decided he needed it. So I was like, okay. So we agreed on a price, and he started paying me some monthly installments, you know, just a little bit each month, what he could afford. And so I had a little bankroll, you know, and I could kind of do some stuff, and I did stuff on other cars.
Uh-huh.
And then it really didn't start until 2022. A buddy of mine, Dan, from St. Louis, he bought a bunch of Riviera parts from a lady, and I believe the husband had passed away, and she was parting out, just selling all the stuff out of the garage. And so he was there for Riviera parts, and as he told me, he goes, she asked him if he wanted some Model T stuff. And he said, well, maybe, you know, where's it at? She goes, well, it's all in the house. He goes, I saw this place. And he's like, there wasn't no Model T parts anywhere. And she goes, oh, no, it's in the attic.
Oh, my.
So this was flat packed, you know, as a cowl, a side, a back piece, and a couple other little things, a grill shell and whatnot. And so it was up in the attic, along with an entire 26, 27 touring car that was also taken apart meticulously, every rivet. It had one of the most beautiful sets of sub rails I've ever seen in my life, all taken apart very meticulously at the rivets, you know, each rivet punched out and taken up into the attic through, I'm guessing, a normal attic access, which seems wild to me.
Right. Yeah.
But he bought it all and put it up on Instagram and was like, hey, I got all this, but I don't want it. So somebody needs to buy it. He's like, I got it out of the garage. I kept it from getting junked. Somebody needs to buy all this crap. Get it out of my driveway. And so, you know, St. Louis is only 6 hours away. So it's right next door, basically.
Exactly.
So I made the rundown, and me and my dad did a quick day run down to St. Louis, picked it up, and then basically just came back home. And it was the pieces that it was like I said, the cowl and the two sides, and then the top probably about foot of the back, because it was originally a touring. Okay. And so it just had the top part across the back with the arch up and everything. And so that's kind of, if you look at my car's kind of weird in the back. It's got some kind of weird bumps in the sides because I didn't want to pinch the frame. So I made some bumps to kind of come out of the cowl and to come out of the back of the car to kind of line up with the frame and kind of flow into it. Mm-hmm. I kind of got that idea. I stole that pretty well from Brian Bass because his rig does the same thing. I figure it's a good place to steal ideas from. Yeah, Brian's a good guy to get ideas. And so, I kind of put it together. I had a set of TT rails, and it would have been like in, I think I started really doing it in the 1st of October 2022. Okay. And I built the whole car in 6 months. Yeah, that's a good turnaround time. Yeah, it's and I did a bunch of stuff I'd never done before. You know, I mean, I'd never built the chassis from scratch before, and that whole chassis, I mean, I started with Model TT rails, but every cross member is made by me. And,
Okay.
you know, some of them are tubular and some of them are fabricated fully. And I did quarter ellipticals front and back. I've never done that before. And if you've ever tried to find information on quarter ellipticals, they're pretty far and few between.
Yeah.
And people have a lot of contradicting stuff about them on the internet. And so I kind of guessed on some stuff. And then I asked Eric and a couple other guys for some advice. And I got advice from Eric at The Rock in 2022 when I was just starting building. I was like, what do I need to know about quarter elliptics? He's like, don't do them. Like, that's not helpful, Eric.
Not the information I was wanting.
So I decided to make it even harder for myself, and I hid the front ones inside the frame rails.
Yeah.
That's a Chevy front frame horn that is bumped up to cover the top of the spring because it needed to have room to go up.
Mm-hmm.
And then the front of it's all bait. I mean, there's probably 20 or 30 pieces in that front end. It's all welded together. And it's thick. And it has a C channel basically that it's a 3 sides of a piece of box tubing that covers up the bottom of the radiator, so it's all protected. And yeah, it's got a Vega box turned on its side that steers kind of like traditional steering, but it's pipping up instead of pipping down. Everybody says that a bump steer. Not enough for me to care about it, apparently. And yeah, I did some unconventional things. Being that I put quarter elliptics in it, I was able to bring the axle right back to the radiator. So I wound up putting the steering behind the radiator. It's kind of weird, non-conventional. It means I had to do a lot of little packaging stuff.
I was to say, so
everything fits really tight.
A little bit of inventing going on in the process.
Yeah.
And that's what hot rodding used to be all about.
Yeah.
It used to be about doing something that, even if it had been done before, there weren't parts available to do most of it. You had to make something to make it work. I'm not that guy. I don't have this skills. So I'm looking at it and like, oh, okay, well, I can see what this probably, I can see that kind of thing and see how you had to make this and that and do stuff. It's just, I think it's one of the things that so many people love the car, and I think it's because of something like that, because it's not something that you just could, unlike anything you have in this garage.
I don't
not a lot of off-the-shelf stuff.
I don't know what you're talking about.
Right, yeah. So
it's one of the things I found a button that's been on my radiator cap, and unfortunately, it wasn't made to be out in the sun for 10,000 miles. Apparently, they didn't figure you would strap it to your car, I guess. Yeah. But it was perfect. I found it, and it said that's the way, because that's the way we've always done it, and it's got a big red X through it. And I'm like, that's pretty much my whole deal with this car. Was it's like it's a T, but it's not the way people do a T.
Yeah,
it's hard for me to tell people that don't truly understand what it is. You basically I've taken to telling people, it's a T. It's kind of like a tea bucket, but it's not. But to the uninitiated, that's kind of all they have to compare it to. It's a little bucket. So as much as I hate to say that, you can see my hashtags on Instagram.
So
it's tea, but tea buckets. But
you get it together. You go on a couple little runs, like you said, 200 miles.
Yep.
And then you take off for Lone Star Roundup. Now, you didn't go Roundup. You went past San Antonio to Houston first?
I went to, so I took the long route because I'm dumb. My buddy Florian down just north of Houston, he was like, hey man, if you want to come down, like come to my place and you can just travel up with us. And I'm stupid and I don't know how far away Houston is from anything. So I'm like,
especially from here.
Totally. There's free, there's a free room right there,
A couple hundred miles past where you're going.
So I drove from here to Dallas, I think it was Fort Worth maybe, to my buddy Adam's place the first day. And that's a trek. That was a haul. And I mean,
that's 5 hours from us in Wichita.
Yeah, and we're
4 hours
north of that.
basically.
because I went down to Topeka and then went
down 75.
down 75 all the way, and
it gets a little rough in Oklahoma.
it was interesting. There was a lot of traffic and a lot of construction in Oklahoma, and for those of you who don't know or haven't seen the car, the motor that I put together for this thing is junk. It's that's putting it nicely. It's an old block out of a Chevy pickup that we, just dingle ball honed it and kind of put it together and kind of hoped it would be good, and it wasn't.
Yeah.
It's got one cylinder that just fouls the plug pretty immediately, and runs oil through it pretty good. But I was on the deadline, so I didn't have time to stop and get a block machined and look for another block. But cost prohibitive at the time because I was throwing a car together. So
right.
At one point we were going through Oklahoma, and I was averaging 50 miles to a quart of oil.
Wow.
So the whole passenger side of the car looked like an oil slick, Luckily, after Oklahoma, it kind of calmed down. I think the rest of the rings seated in because, this car's only got, 200 miles on it when I left.
Right.
And so, the motor's not even fully broke in.
By then, you're at 600 miles once you get through.
Yeah, so you're basically, good to go. But yeah, so I drove down through Oklahoma, made it into Texas, and made it in there to Fort Worth, my buddy's place. And the passenger side front tire was nearly bald on the outside edge of it. And we determined that it had what we thought was bad bearings in it. And it was a little looser than I would have liked it to be. And the bearing, the inside of it was loose from the outside of it. It just wasn't good. So turned out this car has been a huge model of just going out and doing stuff, and stuff just takes care of itself.
Yeah.
I was at my buddy Adam's place when we figured that out, and he hadn't had an early Ford for probably 6 or 7 years at least, and he still had a set of bearings on the shelf for it.
Nice.
Original Ford stuff. So we packed the bearings, we put them together, we stuck them in the car, and I kept on tooling the next morning to Houston, which I stopped at 3 shops along the way. I went to visit a couple buddies and visited Matt at Murray's, and stopped and talked to Eric, the guy that had the other tee, and the other guys at Ray Street Garage, Mark, and them guys, and went through and did that. Stopped at Bass's place, saw his shop, and then when I told Bass, I was like, hey, I better get moving on down the road. And he's like, oh yeah, where are you staying tonight? And I'm like, Houston. And he's like, what? He's like, you know how far away that is? I'm like, nope. And this is like mid afternoon, And so
after you should have left, right?
Yeah, way further after I should have left. And so I didn't want to hop on the interstate because, like I say, this thing only had 1,000 miles probably at that point. So that would be a little less than 1,000 at that point. But I went, I'm driving along down the road, and I'm like, I really don't want to get on the interstate. So I did 2-lane blacktops all the way from Dallas to Houston.
But in Texas, 2-lane blacktops are
75. And I'll tell you what, so I didn't put the wings on,
right,
the wind wings on until I got to Houston.
Right.
And the reason those are on there is because at 75, that thing will beat the ever-living crap out of you because the wind just whips around and it was bad. Yeah. So I was driving 75 down these Texas back roads, hunkered down in the center of the car, steering from the middle, kind of leaning up to the windshield, just trying to stay out of the wind. But, I knew it's getting dark, and I'm going, man, I don't know where the heck I am.
Yeah.
Driving down through the middle of Texas, and I made it. We got all the way down there by Hempstead, Texas, and I hopped out onto a main drag. Turned out to be I needed to turn like a mile down the road. Well, this thing's running like garbage because the plugs are fouling up and stuff, and so I was driving down the road, and I was getting on it and getting off of it and watching the fireballs come out of the exhaust, and I missed my turn. And so I had to go another couple miles down the road and turn around. I get back, and my buddies was like, he's like, we heard something go by. And he goes, well, we thought, well, he went on by. It must not have been Joey. And he goes, we were trying to call you, but, I can't hear nothing.
Right.
So, but he's like, we were wondering if you're going to make it. I made it there like 10:30 at night. It was dark, and I rolled in and, made it there. The next morning, we started looking around. I blew an axle seal on the driver's side. So the passenger side is getting soaked with oil from the number 6 cylinder that's just barfing oil out of the exhaust. And the driver's side was covered in axle grease. So it's like, I wasn't stopping worth a crap.
Well, we should mention to people who haven't seen the car, there's no front brakes. It's all rear brakes.
It's spindle mount front wheels, 12 spokes, best wheel ever invented.
It looks amazing.
Yeah, it's pretty great. Of course, I'm going to change them, but whatever.
You can always move it around, right?
So the rear is an S10 10 bolt with a set of the coolest brakes that GM ever put on a non-Corvette vehicle.
Okay.
I mean, they're super bitchin' little finned calipers on there that. Everybody's like, oh, what are those off of? I'm like, an S10. And they go, what?
So now you're just about to the Gulf of Mexico. I mean, you're half a country north to south away from where you started.
Yep.
There's rain coming, right?
Man.
There's rain coming in the forecast. I don't think it's rained yet that week.
I got that at just the right time. I came at just the right time. The next day, it cut loose. That night I stopped loose. It cut loose, and it poured. It poured. Like, we got rain up here, and they got monsoons down there, It's pretty bad. But
I'm sure it's being fed off the Gulf, too, so it's just something moisture.
And but we had stuff to fix. I pulled that thing in the garage the morning after I got there and started fixing stuff. Luckily, again, I'd never pulled a 10 bolt before apart, and I was in the right spot. I was in a mix of a bunch of Chevy guys down there.
Yeah.
So they wouldn't have been able to help me if I needed a bearing in the front end, but the rear end is a Chevy rear end. They're like, we know all about that.
The key is to where you time your breakdowns.
Exactly. And that's kind of been the story of this car. Everywhere I've broken down with the people that I needed to break down with.
That's a good good way to do it.
So we fixed an axle seal, and when we pulled the axle out to get to the axle seal, I started cleaning out the bottom of the rear end because I didn't open the rear end before I left. I welded brackets to it, made sure it rolled over without going clink, clank, clink, clank, clink, clank, and then drove it 1,000 miles to Texas.
Send it.
Pretty much. I didn't even. I filled the gear oil in it. I didn't make sure that any of the stuff that was in there was good. So, but I started cleaning it out. I'm cleaning out the bottom of the rear end, and then I find a tooth. And I'm like, ooh, that's not good. So I clean out a little more, and I find another one. Like, oh my! So we have the thing up on deck stands, and we start rolling over the rear end real slow, and there's one that's gone. There's one that's gone. There's two that are just about ready. They're all cracked, about ready to come off spider gears, And luckily, Houston, Texas is one of the main hubs for O'Reilly's. And so we went to their local O'Reilly's, and they're like, yeah, we can have a new set of spider gears 9 o'clock tomorrow morning. I'm like, I guess order them up because I'm going to need them for the ride home. So we got that, an axle seal, and we put that thing together. We had it back together that Thursday. I think I rolled in like Tuesday or something. We got it all buttoned up. My buddy Florian, I had a little mishap right before we left. It's got a mechanical clutch linkage with a Z-bar that comes through the cowl. And I had miscalculated where that hole needed to be when I did all the body work and stuff. And so I had this big, obnoxious looking hole cut in the cowl. And I literally, and Florian's a body guy. And so I literally got there. I've never met Florian before in my life. I knew him from the internet, but I never met him in person before. And got down there, shook his hand, said hello, and he pointed down at the cowl and said, we're not going to Roundup with your cowl looking like that. And I'm like, okay. So Thursday night, I think it was, we cut a bigger hole in my cowl, and he dimple dyed me a nice little hole now that we knew where the hole needed to be. Mm-hmm. And we put that thing in there. Well, I should say he put that in there. I stood around and made sure he didn't catch the inside of the car on fire. Yeah. But yeah, did that and a couple other little things. Made the wind wings. I should mention we made it. I made it all the way down there. My buddy Jason Cripps from Des Moines, he flew into Houston, and my original plan, because I'm naive, I was going to drive this thing to the Houston airport, pick him up, and then bring him back to Florian's place. And I got down there, and Florian's like, "That's a terrible idea. You should go nowhere near the Houston airport in that thing. You'll get run over." And so
they don't play on those roads down there. So it escalates a small vehicle.
Yeah. We learned that later on in the week. We went through Dallas at night, and that was a fun deal. We watched a dude in an Escalade or something. He went across 4 lanes of traffic, just like sideways, just rolling on through, 80 mile an hour. But yeah, we went. So one of the other guys, he went and picked Jason up from the airport, and then he helped us out working on the car, getting it ready. And we were also getting Florian's car ready, a 29 Chevy Coupe with an inline 6 and straight pipes exhaust. It was a pretty nice little car. But we were getting it ready for its first initial. I mean, it had 0 miles on it basically at all. And then we went and he took it to Roundup. But we were just kind of getting stuff ready. And then Friday morning, we met up with some other guys at the Buc-ee's and took off for Lone Star Roundup. Yeah. So that, and Jason was riding with me at that point, and he rode with me the rest of the trip back to my house. So he's currently leading in miles passengering in the team. He's got a little bit about 1,000 miles on it.
Well, I remember running into that because we rolled in that morning with a daily driver. And,
here's my friend.
And we were oh my gosh. Wait a minute. Did I guess you've been to Houston before you got here? That's just the wrong way, man.
Yeah.
And he kind of told me some of the story there. And so was the ride home just as epic or just smoother?
So we left. We went to Lone Star Roundup there. We got there Friday, like mid-afternoon or so, because we were slow. We went over some back way into the fairgrounds. So we wound up, I think we crossed the same railroad track 27 times and rode some of the roughest roads in Austin getting in. And of course, I had this thing set as almost as low as it goes, so it looked like it was about to hit the ground, and it did quite a few times.
Yeah, it happens.
But we made it in there, saw a bunch of other people, parked right up front, and then walked away and looked at all the other stuff. And then we stayed the night at a hotel there Friday night into Saturday. And Saturday we left, I think, about 3 or so in the afternoon because it was calling for rain that night. Yeah. And so we took off, and we were determined we were going to make it at least to Dallas. And so we made it all the way north to Denton. Uh-huh. And we avoided all the rain. Barely. I mean, we had some close calls. And then, well, actually, I should say, on the way up from Austin to Dallas, all the way home, we took 35. 80 mile an hour, all the way home.
Oh, you're really not that different than the 2 lanes in Texas,
right?
You're technically 5 mile an hour different, right?
So, so we're rolling down the highway, like I said, between Austin and Dallas, and all of a sudden the car just bogs and then dies. Oh, we're riding down. I'm in the fast lane. Yeah, we're rolling, and just bogs and dies. And I'm like, oh crap. So I quickly jag across 4 lanes of traffic and over onto the shoulder, which luckily in that area it was a wide, big, like car and a half shoulder, So roll over and find out the thing flooded. Weirdest thing ever. I never had a car flood while you're going down the highway, but it flooded the carburetor, and so I pulled all the plugs out on the side of the road. We rolled the thing over, and it shot a bunch of fuel out of the thing. Some buddies from Dallas stopped and helped us, and so there's a great picture that I posted before of me driving the car, because we were sitting on the side of the interstate, getting passed by semis right next to us.
Inches away.
It was a little hairy, but I do that, on my day-to-day job, so it's not as bad for me. I'm kind of used to it. But they were like, "How about we get this thing off the highway?"
Yeah, and it's Texas. There's a frontage road 15 feet over there, right?
Yeah, it was a little further than 15. Okay, it's probably about 100 or so, probably at least. But one of the guys from Dallas, he walked the whole ditch, and he goes, "Hey, there's no big gullies or anything." He's like, "Just come through here. There's not even a curb over here to the frontage road." He's like, "Just drive it on over." So there's a great picture of me that this random guy that stopped by and offered a trailer to us if we needed it. He stopped and he took a picture of us as I'm driving across, and all you can see is the windshield and the top of like my head and the back of the car and like the tops of the headlights floating across this grass. It had to be like, 1.5 2 foot tall grass. And I drove into it and I'm thinking, what am I doing? I get stuck down here. I'm screwed. Yeah. But we made it across, and then found out wasn't charging either, which is not a great thing. Yeah. And all the threads had stripped off of the main stud for the starter. So again, our buddies from Houston, one of them gave me a pair of little vice grips, the little needle nose vice grips, and I pushed as far up as I could and clamped them things down, which of course makes the vice grips hot because they're part of the 12-volt circuit now. Right. And so I wrapped the entirety of the vice grips in electrical tape after zip tying them together so they'd stay on. And I drove all the way home now. So yeah, we made it all the way home. Like I said, we made the Denton that night, and we checked into a hotel, and they had like 2 buildings with like a walkway in between them. Uh-huh. And this is like 9-10 o'clock at night, and me and Jason are trying to push the car in because it's going to rain, and you can tell it's going to rain good. And so we're trying to push the car into this walkway. And the guy who runs the hotel comes out and he's like, "You can't do that, you can't do that, you can't do that." And I'm thinking, okay, well, I have a tarp, I was going to put it on anyway, even when we got under there. I was like, okay, well, I guess we'll just risk it, maybe it'll get filled with water, maybe it won't. And he goes, "Just give me a minute." He goes, "I'll move my car, you can park under the carport." They had a carport for just the people that owned the hotel there. Yeah. He let me park there overnight, so that was kind of neat. That'd be nice. Then we got up the next morning and dead. That's it.
Okay. Well, battery must have died. Well, we still have this running, so we can take these off, then we'll just talk to that.
Alrighty. So yeah, we woke up the next morning at like 6:30, and basically looked at our phones and said, okay, if we're going to go, we need to go now, right? Like, now's the time. So we took off, and we made it mostly without incident up through to Oklahoma, and then the sun started shining, and it got warm again.
Right.
And so we made it up there and kind of got out of all the bad stuff and got up on the Kansas Turnpike. And at one point I was doing about 85. And Jason slaps my arm, and I'm like, "What?" And points up at the tire, and the tire's just doing basketball over there. So I had to keep it under 85 for the rest of the ride home. But made it home, and that kind of started the whole year for me. Had this lofty goal of 10,000 miles, right? And I thought that's a good goal, and then I didn't really think about how much work that was going to be. the car.
So now here we are. We're not quite to spring, but we're getting close. We're a few weeks away.
It seems like it today,
Right?
doesn't it?
It's going to be 78 degrees this week down in Wichita at least. And you got some updates you're getting ready to do. So what's the main plan to get ready for this year's show travel?
So this is kind of I've determined that this car is going to stick around. It's not going to be something I sell. So I've got time to do updates and stuff. But biggest update I'm doing this year is going to be I've got a whole new motor in the works. It's another small block with a roller cam.
Okay.
I've got a 4-carb Wyand intake for it with 494s on it. And it'll look a little different, but it'll be mostly the same parts.
Yeah.
And then
more an evolution than a complete rebuild kind of thing, right?
it's just kind of updating it. The 4-carb manifold I actually bought off my buddy Dennis before I even had the car really put together in my head, and he gave me a super good price on it, and I just kind of made it happen, and so so I've had that. That's been in the plans, but I just never got around to doing it because that thing gets like 22 miles per gallon. So I kind of liked that when I was doing 10,000 miles.
It helps you do a lot of miles.
And so we got that. And then I've got just off camera here a set of vintage chrome reverses on vintage pinner white bias plies. They're Merc centers on like a Buick rim with slanted barrels. They're actually off of a show car from Illinois from the 60s.
Okay.
That made the scene and has been kind of updated. They put Halibrands on it. They took off the original chrome reverses and somehow they found their way to my buddy up by Chicago, and then I bought them off of him. They came home with me through another friend who was coming through on their way back to the 50s. So those rims came back with me. Jeff Titus was good enough to take the tires off because if I had to take them with the tires, it was going to fill the whole car up. But luckily, I just had to do the rims, and they rode in the passenger seat all the way home from back to the 50s.
Nice.
But yeah, so they're the next evolution for the front. Still no front brakes because who needs them?
Right.
But yeah, that'll be the next update, and I'm working on a top for it to kind of be a V2 version 2 updated little thing.
Yeah. Well, let's stop the video since the audio recorder just died.